There's a high when you go on stage and you see all these people like just loving your music and loving you and stuff, and there's these girls and all these people going worshiping me. When you see all those people just going nuts for you, it's like, you know, it puffs you up inside. You're like, you know, I'm important. That's where drugs can creep in, and, you know, cocaine or whatever, methamphetamines crept in, and it all came from after drinking for me and my friends. And it seems like fun in the beginning. It's a lie because it turns around on you. It starts to wear on your personality, starts to wear on your relationships, and everything is affected by it negatively. Everything.
When you have reached the top and something's still missing, where do you go? Brian Head Welch's life was spinning out of control. As lead guitarist for the band Korn, people worshiped his music. He made all the money, had all the cars, houses, and women he could handle, but still found himself with a crippling addiction to meth. He couldn't stay sober. He hit rock bottom. He was stuck in a big way. Maybe you can relate to Brian's story. Maybe you can't because you don't do drugs, but you are stuck. You sit down in front of your computer to check a sports score, and you find yourself looking at porn again. Or you stop by the store to just get one thing, and all of a sudden you've maxed out your credit cards on stuff you will never use. Or you escape the day's stress and the kids, and you sit down and eat a whole tub of ice cream. You know you're stuck because this isn't the first time it's happened. We've been in this series called Restore, and it's all about helping us to get unstuck in 2018 from whatever is holding us back. The one thing that's robbing us of life and freedom. For some of us, it might look like finding freedom from your past. For others of us, it might be finding freedom from a hurt or a hang-up that's been keeping us stuck for years. Or like Brian Head Welch, it might be finding freedom from that thing that started out as just a fun weekend party thing to do, and now it's a full-blown addiction to alcohol, pot, meth, or heroin. Whatever it might be, the goal is to get unstuck in 2018. To help us get unstuck in a big, life-changing way, we've been looking at the 12 steps to spiritual growth. The 12 steps are really just biblical principles for spiritual growth, and they form a pattern for living, a way of living and thinking and viewing life from a new perspective. These 12 steps are not just for dealing with addictions or recurring patterns. They are a way to live, a way that will allow God to bring us spiritual growth, no matter how long we've been following him. You see, we all have issues that hold us back and keep us stuck. Things that we are powerless to change on our own. Things that need to change because they are robbing us of a life. And we covered steps 1, 2, and 3, and if you weren't here in the past weeks, you can go to our Facebook page at Gateway Branson, or you can go to our website at gatewaybranson.org and watch or listen to those past messages. Step 1 says, we admitted we were powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors, that our lives had become unmanageable. See, if we're going to walk the path of recovery, the first thing we have to do is admit we have a problem. The truth is, we're all stuck. We're all a mess. But the issue is, that we don't see it, or we won't admit it. And that's what keeps us stuck. See, a problem denied can destroy you. A problem hidden can't be healed. 12-steppers actually have a saying, "You're only as sick as your secrets." Let me tell you a secret. They're right. Last week we talked about how many of us think that if we admit we have a problem, that if we ask for help, that it's a sign of weakness. But we learned that if you admit you need help, if you admit you're not all powerful, if you admit that you are no longer in control of your life, that you're actually blessed because now God's power can work through you. Last week we looked in the New Testament of the Bible at Paul. And if you didn't know, the Bible's broken up into an Old Testament and a New Testament. The Old Testament of the Bible is about life on earth before Jesus came, and the New Testament of the Bible is about life on earth after Jesus came. If you don't have a Bible, we want to give you a free Bible. We've got easy-to-read Bibles over here at the Connection Spot, and we'd love for you to take one home with you and dive into it. If you have our Gateway Branson app that you've downloaded from the Google Play Store or the iTunes Store, there's actually a link to a Bible in there. And the Bible is then broken up into chapters, books and chapters and verses. And so if you don't have a Bible or don't know where we're at, no big deal. We're going to put all the verses up on the screen. So Paul, he was this first century follower of Jesus and church planner. And he kept asking God to change his circumstances. God tells Paul, though, that in his weakness, that he would become more because Paul would be able to plug into God's power. Look what Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. For each time he said, "My grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me." Your house, your apartment, your motel room, they all have electric outlets where you can actually plug in your cell phone if your cell phone died. But if you don't plug your phone or your charger into those outlets, your phone won't recharge. See, it works the same way with God. We have to plug in to God's power for it to work within us. Step 2 says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 2 is all about trusting God that He knows what's best for my life. Only through trusting God with our will and our ways could we be restored back to sanity. But knowing it and doing it are two different things. That's why step 3 says, we made a decision to turn our lives and our wills over to the care of God. We made a decision. We took action to surrender our lives. This is both a one-time decision and a daily decision. And it's also where most people fail, especially Christians. You see, what's interesting is that Christians are people who have confessed to God that we can no longer take care of our sin, that we can only do that through God's help. A lot of us admitted we were powerless to that, to taking care of our sins, and we became Christians. But ever since that day, we have said, you know what, God, I'm capable of taking care of myself. We gave God control of our eternity, but we fire Him daily and take control of our here and now. And that keeps us stuck. That's why step 3 is so important. For us to plug into God's power, we have to surrender to Him daily. We have to trust Him with our lives because we need His power, the power that we don't possess. We need that power to get unstuck. It's the only way we can access God's power. It's the power that got Jesus unstuck from the grave. It's the same power that raised Jesus from from death after he died on the cross to life. Remember what Paul said about this power in the New Testament book of Ephesians, chapter 1, verse 19. I also pray that you will understand the incredible greatness of God's power for us who believe in him. This is the same mighty power that raised Christ from the dead and seated him in the place of honor at God's right hand in the heavenly realms. Now he is far above any ruler or authority or power or leader or anything else, not only in this world, but also in the world to come. See, there's a point when you finally look in the mirror at an image that you're tired of seeing. And if you really want to quit, to get unstuck from an addiction or a behavior, complete surrender is required. We have to fire ourselves and hire God. And we have to take a hard look at who we are. Which brings us to step 4. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Searching means that we are going to be as thorough as we can. Fearless reminds us of steps 1, 2, and 3, that because we are plugged into God's power, we don't have to be afraid. And moral simply means we're going to be honest about who we are. See, denial acts to prevent our completion of a thorough 4-step inventory. Our hearts may know profound areas of pain that need to be acknowledged and grieved for. However, our puffed up words or excuses will tend to minimize and discount the gravity of both the wrongs we have committed against others and the wrongs that have been committed at the hands of others. How do we deceive ourselves with excuses? We might say something like, the adult of a workaholic will minimize the pain of an absentee parent, or the abuser of prescription drugs may discount the growing addiction because the doctor ordered it. The relationship addict or the sex addict may rationalize countless violations of the boundaries of others by saying these things are done in the name of love. We have to be completely and thoroughly honest with ourselves. Look what the big book of AA says about step 4. Step 4 is our vigorous and painstaking effort to discover what these liabilities in each of us have been and are. We want to find out exactly how, when, and where our natural desires have warped us. We wish to look squarely at the unhappiness this has caused others and ourselves. By discovering what our emotional deformities are, we can move towards their correction. Without a willing and persistent effort to do this, there can be little sobriety or contentment for us. Without a searching and fearless moral inventory, most of us have found that the faith which really works in daily living is out of reach. See, step 4 is where the rubber meets the road. Step 4 is called the inventory step. That simply means that we're going to take an honest look at all of our good and bad character traits, peeling back the curtain and exposing it all. When you take inventory, you take notes or write down all that comes to mind. And you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, Brian, I have to write down all my negative character traits, my defects. I have to admit that I hurt others. I have to own my insanity, take responsibility for all the times I manipulated, lied, or stuffed things. Yes, believe it or not, it's important for a solid and life-changing recovery. You'll be writing a lot in step 4. You'll be looking at your past. You'll be looking at maybe some childhood wounds or traits that you've picked up along the way. You'll feel some things you may have been numbing for decades, and you'll learn to work through them. You'll courageously tackle any character shortcomings or defects or internal programming that have kept you stuck in bondage. Unresolved anger or guilt can keep you from walking in the freedom and new life that you're beginning to find in Christ. See, we have to put to death those old thoughts and feelings of resentment or guilt. That's the only way we can find that freedom. See, in fact, Paul says this when he's instructing a group of people who, although they've been given a new life in Christ, they're still getting stuck. So look what he tells them in the New Testament book of Colossians chapter 3, verses 5 through 10. So put to death the sinful earthly things lurking within you. Have nothing to do with sexual immorality, impurity, lust, and evil desires. Don't be greedy, for a greedy person is an idolater, worshiping the things of this world. Because of these sins, the anger of God is coming. You used to do these things when your life was still part of this world. But now is the time to get rid of anger, rage, malicious behavior, slander, and dirty language. Don't lie to each other, for you have stripped off your old sinful nature and all its wicked deeds. Put on your new nature and be renewed as you learn to know your Creator and become like Him. See, we have to put that old life to death. And in step 4, we will ask God to allow courage to rise so that we can be completely honest with ourselves while doing it. You will dig deep. You will shed layer after layer of pain and lies and shame and anger, and you will get to the guts of who you are, God's masterpiece. It's a fact and a promise. We see God tell us that in the New Testament book of Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things He planned for us long ago. So with God, you're going to courageously take a thorough and honest look at yourself. And then we're going to list the people that we have resentments toward and what they did to cause those resentments. We're going to note the effect of those actions and the effect that they've had on our lives and the damage that they have caused. And most important, we're going to own up to our own part in each of these areas. So how do we do this? Where do we start? There are a number of ways to do an inventory. But we are going to approach it by going after these 5 areas that we've broken down into 5 columns on an inventory worksheet that is on your chair. So if we look at column 1, the person, here is where you list the person or object that you resent or fear. Go back as far as you can. Column 2 is the cause. You may have heard the saying, hurt people hurt people. Well, in this column, you're going to list the specific actions that someone did to hurt you. What happened that caused your resentment or fear? Maybe you were called stupid or fat or ugly growing up. Whatever it was, you're going to list it here. The effect in column 3. Here you'll write down how that specific hurtful action affected your life. List the effects that it had on your past and on your present. Column 4, the damage. How were you injured? Socially, have you suffered broken relationships, slander, or gossip? Security, has your physical safety been threatened? Have you faced financial loss? Sexually, have you been a victim in an abusive relationship? Has your intimacy or trust been damaged or broken? And then column 5, my part. Here you ask yourself, what part of my resentment against another person is my responsibility? Ask God to show you your part in a broken marriage or relationship with a distant child or parent, or maybe a lost job. And then in addition, list all the people whom you've hurt and how you hurt them, and then have the courage to ask yourself the following questions for each one. Where was I selfish? Where was I dishonest? Where was I inconsiderate? Where was I afraid? If you've been in an abusive relationship, especially as a small child, if you've been a victim of molestation and rape, this can provide incredible freedom to you, because you will see that you had no part, no responsibility for the cause of your resentment. By simply writing the words none or not guilty, you can begin to be free from any misplaced shame or guilt that you've carried with you. I know this feels like a lot of information. You may even feel like drinking from a fire hose right now. So to help explain a 4-step even further, I want you to meet Bobby. Bobby was an 18-year meth addict, and he'd get sober for a minute and then end up right back in addiction. He was stuck. Now Bobby has 3 years of sobriety and is walking others through their 4th and 5th steps, which we'll cover next week. But right now, please welcome Bobby Harkness. Hey, Bobby.
Well, hello.
Hey, give us a little background of your journey up to working the steps. How bad was your addiction, and what convinced you to admit you had a problem?
Well, I actually got introduced to methamphetamine at 15 years of age, so actually I'm a 20-year addict. And, I was like a majority of people. I was just trying to find where I fit in. And when I got high for the first time, it gave me everything I ever wanted. I had a pretty low self-esteem growing up, so it kind of gave me this ego boost, and I was part of a clique, and I got a sense of well-being being a part of, and it just shot me into a crazy way of living.
When did you decide your life was unmanageable?
Well, probably my early 20s. My woman at the time was pregnant with my son, and I was supposed to be a provider of the house, and I was just buried in my addiction, couldn't hold a job. We got piled up in debt, and I remember I was staying gone at like weeks at a time, and we got really behind. She was working part-time. She was going to college too at the same time, and I needed help. And I tried to quit, and I just couldn't do it. And so I ended up putting myself in my first rehab, early 20s.
Well, we talked with Boo last week about step number 3, and that is the first action step, that we have to turn our will and our life over to God. Basically, we have to surrender, and we have to quit playing God and let God be God. So how hard was that for you?
It was really difficult, I'm an alpha male. I wanted to run the show constantly. So even when I first got introduced to the steps, there was this part of me that just did not want to give that control up. So when I first attempted the steps, I did everything but a step 3, and needless to say, it didn't work. It really took me going back out there numerous times and falling flat on my face before finally I was like, enough is enough. My best thinking got me in the dumps each and every time. Jails, institutions, and probably soon to be death. So there was a point in time where I admitted defeat and was like, I can't do this no more.
So walk us through step 4. How important is it?
Man, it's everything. You know, we go through life accumulating a lot of junk a lot of times. I know for myself I did, and I did a lot of hurtful things towards people, you know, trying to maintain my addiction. And a lot of hurtful things happened to me. And, you know, you accumulate this baggage of resentment, fear, and just crazy conduct. And it's just like, you know, you pile it up on your back and it just weighs you down. And what I realize is that it subconsciously affects every aspect of my life, my character, my emotions, how I interact with others. And when I truly worked a 4-step, I actually, you know, and it took a lot of faith to do it because there's just a lot of junk you put on a 4-step that you don't want to share. You want to keep it locked in that closet, you know, and so it was tough. And believe it or not, you know, I have to be honest, it took me a couple 4-steps. My last 4-step was a very small 4-step because I still had to share some stuff that was really tough for me to share, you know, but it was funny because in my recovery, when I worked a big 4-step that left a few things out, I did achieve some great recovery in that, but there was always this little thing in the back of my head that was like, hey, you know, there's still some more junk that you need to share.
So what if someone out there is saying to themselves, I don't want to dredge up my past and all that pain and those resentments? What would you say to that?
Man, just have faith in God, trust in Him, you know, trust it, you know, seek wise counsel, you know. After I did my 4th and 5th step, I burnt those pieces of paper up and gave it to God and never had to look back at it, you know. Was it tough to do a 4-step? Yes, because every resentment, every fear, every conduct, you're basically reliving, you know, for a moment, and it's tough emotionally. But you know, you trust in the plan that God had laid out, and the rewards are endless. There's freedom in those steps, and there's freedom moving through a 4th and a 5th step. Tremendous.
What if I'm embarrassed or ashamed of something that was done to me in my past? What if a parent or a relative or someone I trusted maybe touched me inappropriately? Do I have to share that?
Yes, you do. As a person that has worked the steps and as a person that has helped other people work through those steps, you begin to realize that we're not so different from one another. We have all experienced some junk and some mud. You know, I was molested at 11 years old. And, you know, that was a tough thing to put on a piece of paper. But the truth of the matter is that once I got that out and I started hearing other people's you know, there was a lot of people that have been molested. I think the percentage is up there, especially for us drug addicts and alcoholics, you know, for the people that have been molested. But yeah, you got to trust in it. You know, I've dealt with guys that didn't want to put something down because they could catch major time if this particular thing was shared, you know. But part of doing a 5th step is praying about that individual that you're going to share this with. You don't just share it with.
It's not for everybody to see.
No, yeah. And so you definitely do a lot of prayer, and you look for certain traits in an individual that you're going to share this with.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, great. Anything else you want to share about the 4th step for anyone?
Launch on a course of vigorous action. Steps 1 and 2 are just mental conclusions that, 1, you are powerless and you can't do this on your own. Step 2 is maybe there's this God that can. And then step 3 is saying, you know what, I'm going to let this God take control of my life. And then it's action. 4th the fourth step is truly your first action step. So launch on a course of vigorous action. I know if you're anybody like me, you know, if I could go at my recovery with half the zeal that I went at my addiction, you know, you can get a lot accomplished. And I'm going on my fourth year in recovery, and there's freedom on the other side, and life is good. And I am high. I'm high on life, and I'm high on Jesus, and I'm not going back. I'm not, you know. So I think it's awesome that we're doing the steps here.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, buddy.
Hey, thank
Appreciate you.
All right. Cool.
All right. As we confront our pain, we can identify with the story of the Israelites in the Old Testament of the Bible, where they are faced by a Philistine giant named Goliath. Like many of you, they were faced with a taunting giant and found themselves paralyzed with fear. But through the example of David, a young shepherd boy whose extraordinary faith in a faithful God gave him the courage to face the giant. You too can gain the same courage to face the giants in your life. We must face our pain to overcome it. And like David, plugged into God's power, you can overcome any giant in front of you.